Hello everyone. So I know that recently we mentioned not doing any more mixtapes for the time being, and don't worry, we're not. I thought I'd switch it up a little bit and we'd do some Mondo gore and shockumentaries, and mostly just because they're a little bit more interesting than mixtapes. So today we're going to start off with a 4-part shockumentary series called Shocking Asia. And I'm going to try and make this as interesting as I can, but I think it's going to be more interesting anyway, rather than disturbing or weird or horrible. So this shockumentary is narrated by a man called Wolfgang von Scheibe. You get a little bit of background about Asia, as well as some of the sights, and some elephants even appear at one point. And it's very dated, of course. This shockumentary is from 1974, so yeah, it's a pretty old shockumentary. And for the first little bit, it just really looks like an ordinary travel program. So basically we start off in Kuala Lumpur, where we have a look of the act of Thai Pusan. Now this showcases a religious festival taking part at night in the form of a ritual. So these people basically fast for 15 days, and I can't show it here, but they're then pierced with arrows and sharp objects as part of the ritual. They basically do it to praise the Hindu god of disease, or in the hopes that their prayers will be answered. Some parents even get their children to do it. To disinfect the wounds, ashes of dead people are put onto them. You then see something called kawadi bearers, which are basically men who have these huge ornaments nailed and driven into their skin, where they basically walk in a procession. These people are then taken to a sacred place where the hooks and whatnot are removed, in which they faint because they're no longer moved by a higher power. So we also have a look at the attitude towards animals in Asia. So we go to Japan for this one, where they talk about brutally slaughtering animals to make potency dishes for male customers to enhance their sexual performance. For example, there's a guy cutting up bull testicles. In the animal department, they also basically take us through what each country has that's special to it. For example, Italian pizzerias. Now Japan, in 1974, had snake houses. And this isn't to pet them or to look at them, this is to eat them. We're basically shown the process behind this snake cooking procedure. Now we see this guy eating, and the cook, right, literally just gets out some snake origami and places it in front of somebody. And again, this whole thing falls in with the aphrodisiacs and potency foods reasoning. We're then taken over to Singapore as well, where there's basically markets for people to buy delicacies. Now these delicacies are basically cooked on the street. For example, a bat taken out of a cage, hit in the head and killed, then skinned and cooked. We're also shown some monkeys who actually make really good coconut harvesters. Now animals in Asia seem to be used quite a lot to make a living, and we're also shown this in India, where snake charming is and was a big thing. And not to ruin anyone's life, but cobras are actually deaf. They don't dance to the music, contrary to popular belief. They just copy the rhythm that they feel. They also have a parade dedicated to these snakes, as they're basically a household deity. Now fortunately, unlike Japan, they don't eat the snakes here, but instead give them gifts, because the snakes are so well respected there. And apparently they also do snake charming lessons. So we moved over to Khajuraho next. It's a temple city, except the temple has lots of carvings of sexual positions. Again, this is to do with the sex and the fact that sexual experience is used to reach high levels of wisdom and consciousness. Now, the reason that this is, well, a thing, is because the Hindu god Krishna believes that as a Hindu, you should enjoy all of life's pleasures. We're now taken to the docks of the Ganges River, where unfortunately there was a huge problem with poverty. Staying in the Ganges, we're also told that Hindus are sometimes cremated here, and the ashes flung in the Ganges River after death. Apparently these burials are almost impossible to get into. Around this time, wood was quite a rarity in India, and a lot of families couldn't afford the wood for a complete cremation, so a lot of the bodies at the time were actually given up half burnt. And as to be expected, this area is usually inhabited by vultures who eat the remains. This isn't the first time I've heard about the Ganges burials. It's still done today, as it was shown on an episode of An Idiot Abroad with Carl Pilkington quite a few years ago. Now, as well as throwing these bodies in the Ganges, they also bathe and drink this water as the rotten dead bodies float by. So we're taken back over to Singapore and their version of Chinatown, now to a travelling group. It's basically a group that does all this spiritual stuff, and apparently these guys reach states of full possession. They then proceed to dip their arms in boiling hot oil and pour it over themselves. Along the same lines of spirituality, we're also shown some spiritual mediums who speak in tongue. Apparently these mediums wrote in tongues that barely anyone could understand, which had to be decoded by scholars and scientists. Now these people actually have full-time jobs as teachers, some as students, so they don't actually do this as a job, it's mainly just a hobby, if you like. Now they don't actually profit off of this, like I said, it's basically a hobby and all the services that they do for people are free. Now this is quite obviously something to do with the placebo effect, but it leads people to believe that they're healed. So we go across to the South Sea Islands next, where we learn about medicine men. Some of these men travel from village to village, claiming to have healing powers. One in particular has a stone that he calls the Cosmic Stone. Now this man apparently transfers his powers and healing to sick people. For example, we see the case of an epileptic man being healed by one of these medicine men. The Cosmic Stone is an unexplainable phenomenon. So these fakirs, as they're called, have some odd beliefs. They'll walk around naked on a day that they believe to be a celebration day, beating themselves with their own fists and metal rings. Now on the less religious and spiritual side of things, we're now taken to the red light district of Singapore. Now they actually had to sneak in a hidden camera on this part. They sell all sorts of things here, like condoms, sexual paraphernalia, and items that people can basically buy before they go into these rooms. There's a lot of prostitution on the streets and a lot of sex work. Now the funny thing is, these women don't sell themselves on the streets because they're poor or anything like that. These women actually have full-time jobs during the day. We also get to see inside a typical Malaysian household. Now this is basically the working house of the women that you saw on the streets. They basically work for someone making clothes. So these women have hobbies as well. They make clothes for themselves on the side. However, there's one twist to this. These women are ladyboys. They have penises. And these women all want to, well, be women. However, the waiting list for the operations they want mean that they would have been waiting for years. We get an interview with one of these women who seems to have a boyfriend and a happy life. So we have a look at some of these clinics as well that were designed to handle sex change operations especially. In one of these clinics we see this doctor who in 1974 had only recently learnt about sex change operations and how to perform them. So we follow this one woman, Irene, from the interview. who goes into one of these consultations about changing her sex. They also shoot pictures of these women beforehand, so they have a before and after picture. We're then taken into the operating procedure. Next, we're taken to a penis festival in Japan. It's really just one big cockfest. Penises everywhere you look. Penises in the air. Penises on the ground. Penises on top of people. Staying in Japan, we also visit love hotels. This is basically a hotel where couples go to pleasure each other. And I can't show much of this because this couple just really start going at it. It's basically porn. There's also this lady on a ceiling swing, just riding a man's penis. There's also one room which has a camera in it, which people basically film their own sex tapes. We're taken to a carnival next. This is a tradition in which a huge crowd of almost naked men huddle together and run about to keep warm in freezing cold temperatures. Much like penguins, in this carnival we see some fashion in the form of tattoos, and it's not done with a simple tattoo gun. These tattoos are literally carved into the skin and can never be undone. We're treated to some women's wrestling next, in which we basically just watch this match. After the women's wrestling, there's a little dwarf wrestling match, which is just fucking great. The Tiger Palm Garden in Singapore. Now this is a parade dedicated to Asian myths and legends. It's basically a fantasy land of horror. We then move back over to Japan, where we're taken to the Sex Museum. There's a lot of weird sculptures in this museum, like a woman having sex with a swan, and a giant dangling penis on a huge male statue. It ends with a big collage of boobs and vaginas in a big tunnel made to look like a vaginal opening. And that, in a nutshell, is Shocking Asia Volume 1 from 1974. Thank you guys so much for watching. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.